this is Doug Howard with Growth Team Strategies, and I'm here with our podcast, our weekly podcast, Selling the Dream, about the things you can do to make your business more sellable and to prepare your company and yourself for the selling process. I'm here with my co-host, the exquisite Kathi Fleck. Kathi, how are you today?
I'm great, Doug. How are you doing?
You are great. That's. I'm glad you own up to that. That's awesome. And we're here not only with our first guest on the podcast, but our first returning guest. So this is like going on the Tonight Show, Paula, and doing such a good job, they bring you back the next night again, right?
That's right. I'd like the 5-time jacket that you get on SNL.
There you go. There you go. Or, the 5-time championship thing you get on Jeopardy. Any of those things are good, right? Maybe we'll do what they do on Jeopardy. If you do well enough as a contestant, we'll make you the host, So.
Yeah, that's right.
So Paula is with a company called IAG. It's a mergers and acquisitions company. It's a company that helped Kathi when she sold her business. We've worked with as well. And she's here to share some thoughts today because, she does this all day long, does this all the time, has helped many businesses sell and has some really great insights. So Paula, we appreciate your
Thank
being
you.
here. So today we're going to pick up a conversation that we had a little bit of a conversation about the last time we were together, but it's about sort of assembling this team.
Yeah.
Right. We go through this process, and Paul, I thought you made a really great point on the last conversation we had, which is, people need to stay with it. They need to run the business all the way through the end of the process. Right. These things aren't done until they're done. It doesn't help anybody if the numbers start to taper off or key employees don't stick around, or even just if the climate changes, right? If the enthusiasm for the company changes. And I've seen a lot of people sort of get to the point where they wind down and, they put themselves in a more challenging position. When we think about assembling the team, why don't we start with kind of the role you would play and what you guys do and then kind of who else needs to be part of the team. And then, Kathi, feel free to interject because I know you put together a team when you went through the process as well.
Well, the role that we play up front is especially important because every seller has a business to run. So they have a full-time job already, and selling a business is a full-time job. So doing those two jobs at the same time is next to impossible. So we help the seller do all of the upfront work. We work with them once they've got all their documents and everything together and the promotion that we're going to use, and we start selling them. A lot of time is involved in vetting the prospective buyers. So buyers will see promotions, they'll call or they'll send in a request to learn more about the business. And once we have an NDA signed, then I'll give them a call and I'll chat with them and see if this is a viable buyer. Most sellers have specifications of who they want to buy their company. And so I make sure that this person has the knowledge, the financials, the wherewithal to be able to buy this company and will meet the standards that the seller has set for us to find the buyer for them. So once that all happens, it's important for us to share the information, to answer any questions they may have. And if they're happy with the information about the company, then they want to speak to the seller. And then and only then is when the seller will get involved, once we think we have a viable buyer for them.
Sure. Now, Paula, do you encounter people that just want to, or think they're going to go through the process themselves? Not work with an M&A company or a broker, or just kind of do their own thing? Or
yeah, we see those people, and very often they'll call us after they've tried to do that because they realize it's a grueling process if you don't know it.
Right.
I would not presume to jump in and run that person's company, just like it'd be hard for them to know how to do all the things that you need to do to sell a company without having too many issues arise along the way.
Right. Kathi, it's probably somewhat similar when people say that they don't need a remodeling company to come in or someone to do design. They'll do that themselves, and then they call you. I was watching a show the other day that had people. The whole show was people that had started a project and you needed someone else to come in and like undo what they did before they could finish.
We've certainly seen that. Certain ones are popping through my head as you're mentioning it. Yeah, one was a tub with the drain going the wrong way. So,
Well, that a waterfall, right, or a fountain or something. Right?
oh my goodness.
Yeah. So Kathi, when you were starting the process and going through, not just what you wanted to get for selling the business, but what was important to you as a buyer and some of those, considerations Paul was talking about, what were some of the things on your mind?
Well, I was concerned about my clients and my employees, so I really wanted to keep that same flow going that we had. And so the certain clientele that we attracted, as well as had several projects in place. So it was going to be something to hand it over to somebody else. And so it was really more of making sure that they could follow through with the business end of it and would have the same kind of thinking that I had, even though everybody's going to run things a little differently. So that was part of it. There were several people that came through Paula and I met with. One wanted to partner. Somebody else wanted to change it to a whole different type of program and even met with me and the new owner afterwards, trying to get that to flow. So it's really somebody who's going to take the business that you already have and take it to the next level, keep it going. So that was a big concern. And I'd say there were several other buyer opportunities that may have worked out, but really didn't have the same kind of flow.
Okay. All right.
Another major concern that sellers have, of course, is confidentiality with respect to their customers and their employees as well. And that's something that we are very sensitive to, and that's a top priority for us to make sure that you have that confidentiality for obvious reasons.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, no, it was interesting. When I sold my accounting firm, we were very adamant about making sure that we kind of really held that very close to the vest until the day we went to settlement. Which, I think some of the employees were a little bit off, but we made sure that they had positions and that kind of thing. But it just would have been too easy for things to unravel.
Right.
Now, as a result, and ironically, Paula, it was a company in Texas that specialized in selling accounting firms. They actually found a buyer that was someone I knew. I didn't know him well, but it's like, even though it seemed kind of, I don't know, surprising to me that, we had gone through the process and they certainly earned their fee. So that was fine. But to find somebody that was kind of in my backyard, and then, but by the same token, I don't know how else we could have navigated the process and maintained the confidentiality and all of that if we didn't take it offline, if I had just started kind of hunting around for someone to step in. Right? So that's an important piece of it. Who else needs to be on this team? You mentioned a couple of other folks.
You need a really good lawyer who
Okay.
has lots of experience selling businesses.
Okay.
And if you are interviewing lawyers, if you don't have one and they tell you not a problem, I've not done it before, but there's nothing to it, head out the door. You really need to have someone who knows what they're doing. They will save you a lot of money in the long run and a lot of time. And similarly, accountants who need to support you also need to know what happens when you're selling a company and how best to protect you, how to make sure that you don't pay more taxes than you need to. There are lots of ways that a good accountant can do that for you legally and appropriately. And so those are the two key professionals that you need to have in your court and who need to have lots of good experience doing what we're doing.
Yeah. So, Kathi, how did you come about, in those two particular areas, someone to support you on the accounting side, someone to support you on the legal side?
Well, it's interesting that the CPA that I had worked with prior, I met with him first, and he said that he did represent sellers, that he could help me. And the attorney that I had also worked with selling businesses, but I didn't choose either one of them. And so I had kind of went through a couple bumps in the road with an attorney as well as with a CPA. And for some reason, they weren't going very smoothly. I was running into a lot of issues, and Paula recommended an attorney that she had recently worked with that things went very well. and he and I clicked as well. It worked out very well for me. He was able to help me because it's a very emotional time frame. I was going through some personal issues at the same time, and then selling the business, keeping the business going, and so I really needed that support. And then this attorney also worked side by side with another CPA, and so I hired him. So the two of them could communicate very easily, and they could help me. So for me, they just kind of took it and went with it.
Gotcha.
It was very, very easy with both of them. And then I hired the CPA to handle my taxes, and I'll hire him again this year. So it's, I think that connection has to be easy for you and kind of take the load off of your shoulders as you're going through it, because not only are you running the business, but as Paula mentioned, it's just a very emotional time, and you really can't handle everything yourself.
Sure. And then, from that standpoint, you've talked about the importance of connecting with somebody, communication. I mean, I think people sometimes underestimate in either of those two professions how important it is to have a good connection. You want someone that's talented, you want someone that understands the tax code or the law or whatever, but they've also got to be able to read you, kind of know where your stress points are, I think that relationship is a much more give and take relationship than a lot of people give it credit for. All right. So that's a big deal.
Yeah. One other point there, you need to make sure that they can give you the time that you need.
True.
That's a great point.
Because just like the seller needs to be responsive, if we need something from your CPA or your lawyer, and I had one client up in Amarillo whose lawyer was a trial lawyer, and he decided that was the lawyer he needed, and we were trying to close his deal, but his lawyer was in trial for another 2 weeks, and he said, "Well, I can't get that to you for 2 weeks." So it kept delaying the process. So you need, not only do they need to have experience, they need to have the time to be able to work with you.
Well, and accountants are notorious, right, for telling you it's tax season from probably about this week through the middle of April.
Yeah.
Right? So depending on what stage you're at. So let me ask you, what is the timing? Because it seems to me in these programs or these processes, there are times up front where you need some basic information, on structure or maybe some ideas. Then there's more that they're doing kind of down the home stretch when we know the structure of the deal, or we're trying to interpret the tax consequences of an offer. But these professionals are kind of in and out of the process at various stages along the way, right?
Yeah, they are. And as Kathi can tell you, that due diligence period, once the buyer has given you a letter of intent, and now it's time for them to investigate your business and really dig in to make sure that everything that we told them is accurate.
Yeah.
There are a lot of documents. They want to know about your financials. They want to know about your employees, your history, your customers. There's a lot of information that needs to be provided. And, as Kathi knows, that takes a lot of time to provide all of that documentation during the due diligence process. I would say that's the hardest time during the process for a seller, just because it is such a demanding time. Don't you think, Kathi?
Yeah, I think so. I'm trying to remember, because ours was extended. Instead of a 3-month time frame, it was a 6-month time frame because of the buyer. But the attorney was able to negotiate that pretty, I'm going to say, easily from my perspective. But even as the buyer is wanting certain things that I didn't want to give him, the attorney was also able to go back and forth and negotiate with the buyer's attorney. So we could keep that running well and smooth and not lose the deal. So I do think that he was able to jump in pretty easily and quickly from my perspective. And unlike the first attorney that I had hired, who was going to dig through every line and make sure everything was redlined, he really didn't feel the need to do that. He took it much, like I say, much easier for him.
Sometimes we find that when we get to a certain point, getting the team together for a meeting to say, okay, this is kind of where we are, and this is sort of the straw dog version of this. This is what we're thinking. This is what we're being. Anybody want to weigh in? Sometimes it's helpful for those professionals to hear each other's perspective, because if I say to the attorney, I think we should do X, they might say, no, that's not the best way to do it. If they hear the accountant say, I want to do X because we can do Y, then sometimes they come back and go, okay, I could make that work, but I'd want to do this. You know what I mean? It's like some more context, I think sometimes it can help. What
Well,
about,
sometimes we have, I don't know if you recall, Kathy, but we would have a Zoom meeting with both sides. The
Right. Right.
lawyers,
We had meetings,
yeah.
the buyer and the seller and you. We also had meetings, you and the attorney and me.
Mhm.
But I think a lot of the attorney and the accountant were so used to working together that they just did their own thing. And it was, it was, to me, ran very smoothly.
Yeah.
nice.
And there are some certain circumstances when at the outset, especially for larger companies, that you might want to get everybody together in an introductory session. And,
True.
and that facilitates the process as
Mhm.
well.
All right, I want to cover two more. Let's talk about the banker's role in this. When do we talk to a banker? Who talked to him? Like, what role do they play in these processes?
Yeah, the banker is really the buyer's uh, professional that they're
Mhm.
depending on when they're going for a loan. But then once the usually the buyer is applying for an SBA loan, then the buyer has lots of documents that they're going to want from the seller because they are going to appraise the business and make sure that the business is worthy of them giving a loan, in addition to evaluating the buyer's credit.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of work associated with providing the bank with all the documents that they need in order to prepare for the underwriter.
yeah.
So the seller is very much involved in that aspect of it.
Mhm.
I
I
find
think,
early
Paula,
on, but
there were a couple situations where you had bankers that you could refer to the buyer,
Yes.
as we were running into a couple issues and a couple concerns with different prospective buyers. You have some of those that work very closely
Yep.
with buyers.
Yeah. Believe it or not, even though SBA has a set of rules that are to be followed for SBA loans, which is how for businesses under 5 million, just about everybody goes for an SBA loan. But
uh
every bank has their own rules for
Mhm.
SBA loans, and some are really very stringent and others not so much. So,
Mhm.
it could make a very big difference in the amount of time. Some banks will take 3 months to issue an SBA loan. Other banks will go 45 to 60 days.
yeah,
So that could also impact
Mhm.
how efficiently the whole process
True.
moves forward. So I do like to refer buyers to banks and bankers that I know are very familiar with SBA loans. There are certain banks that just don't do many. They may do two a month.
right,
So you want to work with bankers who do two a day
right.
because then you know that you're going to get a professional.
Yeah, and a lot
Mhm.
of times they have someone in the bank when they're doing a much higher volume that's dedicated to that kind of a loan, right?
Exactly.
They know how to talk to the SBA. They
Yeah.
know what will fly or what's going to be a challenge, right? So it's kind of the same point you made, Paula, with the uh, accountant and the attorney. You want people that are doing this stuff all the time,
That's
right?
right.
They're not
That's
just popping out saying, "Well, I think I can help you." All right,
yeah.
so let's take this last group of folks, the one that's nearest and dearest to my heart, right? Is that when I came into the process working with Kathi, it was more as a business coach, business advisor, um, and work with a lot of folks that either want to sell, sometimes they want to just transition to the next generation, or they have a successor. Others are actually going to go to market. Um, so I guess, Paula, I would ask you first, how often do you see someone like a business coach or consultant or advisor involved in the process? And when you see that, is it a good thing, or is it a, oh my gosh, they have a coach or someone that's going to be one more voice in the process?
No, we welcome that. I don't see it too often, honestly and unfortunately, but it's always a welcome addition. It really makes a big difference because, as I mentioned earlier, uh, a seller in most cases will go through this one time in their lives.
Yeah.
And there's so much they don't know about the process, and they don't know what's important, what's not important. Whereas a coach can help them avoid all of those pitfalls and make the process easier. It's a stressful process no matter what. I have
Yeah,
to be honest about that because of all the emotions and things that are involved, and how difficult it is to be selling your business at the same time that you're running your business.
sure.
But it's much easier with people who are giving you the guidance to help avoid so many of those hurdles that other people will have to go through. We welcome the addition of a coach to the team.
Good. Well, that's good to hear. Kathi, what do you think? What's your perspective on that?
Well, I'm a strong believer in having a coach, and you and I have worked together for a long time, and I've always liked to have kind of that other thought process with me. And you knew my business as well as how I worked, and so it was to me another help to kind of keep things running smoothly. We did a lot of brainstorming. We ran into some lulls when we were in the process of selling, and we would strategize on what can we do. Are there other ways that we can be a little bit more out front in front of potential buyers? So I think that was a help. But I just think also kind of taking a look at my blind spots, you were able to come along and give me other suggestions, or if I'm getting a little bit too stressed with something, you kind of calm me down. So a lot of that Paula helped me with too, but I think just knowing Doug for a number of years as a coach, it was helpful to me.
Well, that's good. Yeah, no, and I think, one of the things, Paul and we first started working together, and, I think we're all three in our own ways. And I mean this in the best possible way, strong personalities, right? And so, but the openness and the willingness to collaborate, I think is important for any professional you put on the team, right?
For
They've
sure.
got to be able to work with the rest of the team, which seems obvious, but sometimes professionals kind of get in their lane
Hmm.
and they're used to just sort of being the voice of expertise or
Yeah.
and sometimes I think that can get in the way of a good collaborative discussion, and so I think that's an important piece too.
Yeah, no, it's a good communication, flexibility, the willingness to listen to one another. All of that really matters in helping to
Mm-hmm.
make for a successful transaction.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, and Kathi, as Paula was describing, sort of people going through this process one time and not really knowing the process.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a lot of the conversations we have about remodeling, right? Someone that's
Right. Good.
trying to navigate a very difficult process. They're doing it maybe once or twice in their lifetime. Maybe they're trying to live in the home at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. I think anytime you're doing something that you've never done before, that the stakes are pretty high, it's really, really important to kind of think that through and say, I need people that are going to guide me through the process. I don't want to be anybody's learning curve, right?
Right.
I always tell people if I'm going to climb Mount Everest, which I'm not, but if I was, I'd want to go that's already with somebody that's already successfully climbed, right? That knows what the process looks like, know what the preparation looks like, know when the weather's getting too intense and we should probably, camp for the night or whatever. And I think it's too important a process. I like to say, we all grew up learning you only have one chance to make a first impression, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Sometimes I'll tell sellers when it comes to selling a business, you only have one chance to make a last impression. Whatever
Mhm.
that deal is, whatever that dollar amount is, that is the sum total of where you leave off in the business. And not just financially, but your legacy, your staff, your customers, all of that, right? And so getting that process right is a big deal, and I think that's what makes these kinds of conversations and the work we get to do together,
Yeah.
very, very important.
Absolutely. I think the professionals that you use will help you get the
Mm-hmm.
most that you can for your business and help you get through the transaction with the fewest number of issues and glitches possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Paula, thanks so much for being with us. We're gonna
My pleasure.
invite you back as we continue to have these conversations, but we always appreciate your insights and certainly appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Thank you. I enjoyed being with you.
Good.
Thanks,
And
Paula.
Kathi, whether you
Yes,
like it or not, we're going to do this again in another week.
I
Right? So,
always enjoy it.
yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of things to consider. And I think there's a lot of things that can be overwhelming. And I think just even breaking it down into just very small pieces, step at a time, letting people wrap their head around it, is something that hopefully will be helpful to folks. There was a study done that there's just a tremendous amount of wealth in the country that will go unrealized by people that don't either realize they have a sellable business
Yeah.
or don't successfully get it sold.
Mhm.
And I think it was on the order of like $1 trillion or something.
Oh,
And so you look at it and say, getting people to that point, getting them to the goals they have, keeping these businesses going, I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. So thanks for being part of it and having some fun doing it. So Doug Howard, Selling the Dream, and we will see you again probably in about a week. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Selling the Dream podcast starring Doug Howard and Kathi Fleck. Both Doug and Kathi have built and sold successful businesses and hope this podcast will help other small business owners do the same. Tune in every week to hear more tips for increasing the value of your company so you get the highest return for your years of hard work when it comes time to sell or transition your business. Can't wait till next week? Check out our website for more information at www.growththemes.com.